Ahead and get started here. This webinar is sponsored by Channel Lock. We're very fortunate to have them here with us today, and of course NRHA Hardware Retailing and the Vendor Partner Program here at NRHA. I'd like to take a minute just here before we get started to introduce you to our sponsor, Channel Lock. Many of you that I'm speaking to are most probably familiar with Channel Lock. It's definitely a brand leader in the hand tools and hardware retail industry. They're also very strong in the industrial and contractor segment, so it's definitely a name out there that is known and well established. What's cool about Channel Lock is that they're really committed to improving the quality and staying affordable for the consumer. And so what we see is that they're very involved in supporting the independent sector, both through NRHA and also through continued research, which was really cool with this particular research campaign. They didn't know what consumers would say. You never know what consumers are going to answer, and since we specifically asked a lot about this Made in America trend, they really were opening themselves up to those trends. So we really appreciate that and really think that holds a very important value. Channel Lock, what makes it very appropriate that they're sponsoring this particular webinar is that they are actually everything, and as we have here, from the bar of the steel to the finished product is made in the U.S., and they're actually still manufactured right out of the factory in Meadville, Pennsylvania, which you may or may not know is not far from where the company actually started. So. Again, Channel Lock is a recognized brand. You may not know this, but this year they're celebrating their 125th year in service, and they actually serve around the world. And they're still family-owned, which is really cool and probably very connectable to a lot of the attendees here today. This next point that Channel Lock has really become synonymous with the tongue and groove plier that it describes and is well known for. And I talked to a lot of retailers who say they have consumers come in and ask for Channel Lock, and really they're asking for that tongue and groove plier. But it just kind of goes to show what kind of brand connection Channel Lock has really made in our industry. They're also very focused on quality, as we talked about before. Currently, they have more than 100 different size and types of pliers, which, if you go to their website and read their history, has been a long process, and it's just very, very impressive to see where they've come and where they are today. But it's so interesting to see how they've managed to stay focused on that core product and really ensure that the retailers and the distributors that are stocking the Channel Lock product know that brand and are connected with that brand name. So today the company employs more than 400 full-time associates. Again, very impressive for a company that old. And finally, we just really wanted to drive home the support that Channel Lock has provided to the independent sector, and I think that you probably get to know that just simply by their sponsorship of these kind of events. But they also were one of the earliest adopters of the Vendor Partner Program, and we actually had one of the editors come back and go through all of our archives, and they've been advertising in hardware retailing for over 50 years, which is just really cool to look back and see how that's developed and their support of the independent sector. We're actually really fortunate today to have Mark Yoder here to welcome you all in person, again, just showing how important the independent sector is. And he's the National Sales Manager at Channel Lock, and I'd like to just give him a few seconds to welcome everyone.
Well, Jamie, thank you very much for such a warm welcome, and everyone there from NRHA. As you know now, Channel Lock remains a family-owned business, much like all the independent channel is, which is extremely important to us. And also by virtue of our size to competition, Channel Lock shares, I think, some of the similar challenges as the independent retailer may face. One approach to support NRHA on this data, we really didn't know what was going to come of it. It was a bit of a risk, but we felt we knew the direction of things, and we're very intrigued and also very pleased at the direction that the data showed in the end. So we know certainly now from some of the visual of this data that it's changed the way that we've marketed our products and gone after consumers to drive them into your stores, and we hope that some of the data and the findings that you see here today will maybe do the same in changing some of your plans. So welcome, and thanks for letting us be a part of this today. Jamie?
Thanks so much, Mark. And actually, at the end of the webinar, when we open it up to Q&A, we'll invite Mark back. And if you guys have any questions about Channel Lock, the products, or anything from Mark, he'll be here to address those as well. So without further ado, let's go over a little bit about what we're going to address in today's webinar. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two different trends that we see happening in the retail industry right now. And one of those being the shop local movement, and then also that Made in America trend. And we'll discuss kind of what the differences are between those, but why are we going into this? What prompted us to start this kind of conversation? And our editors get to travel across the country, and they speak with retailers, they speak with manufacturers, they speak with distributors, and everybody is kind of bringing up this topic lately about that shop local movement and that shift in consumer attitudes. And, you know, I give the example, I'm a millennial, and all my friends are really focused more on shopping their you know, local grocery stores or local clothing shops. Here, I'm based out of Indianapolis, and they would rather shop up at the little shops up in Zionsville than the Walmart in the city center. So it's definitely something I was noticing, but then I started talking with other people, my friends, my family, and it's really a trend that's starting to go across the age barrier, and it's one that all people, whether you're a manufacturer, a distributor, or a retailer, can really zone in on and really get the benefits of. So while we kind of noticed this trend, and I could tell you all my friends who swear they won't shop at the Walmart, we really wanted to have some hard data to quantify what is going on with these trends. You know, we wanted to know, is it different? Is the trend different among consumers? Are the two trends different? How does the consumer define these two trends? Are there restrictions? You know, is there something that would inhibit these trends from working in your market? And then really, what impact does that have on the independent sector, and how can we really lasso that in and use it to our advantage? So what we did was we launched this research campaign, and we did this back in February, so pretty not long ago, and we surveyed more than 1,200 consumers across the United States. So we're talking, we found a sample size from all parts of the country. It was broken out pretty evenly among female and male. I believe it's like 52 and 48% female to male. And what was really cool about this research, which we don't often do in research, or that you don't often find, is that we did go ahead and take that extra step to do some open-ended questions so we could get actual feedback from the consumers. And that's something that we heard from the people that we serve, that they really wanted to hear from the consumers. So we'll go over some of those responses and some of those issues that we got throughout the research as well. And well, I know you'd love to sit here and listen to me talk all day, maybe not. There's a whole in-depth research available online in our July issue of Hardware Retailing, and if you don't happen to have that lying around, you can always go to our archives on nrha.org and kind of go into depth about that some more. We also provide some specific tips for retailers, etc. So I'd highly encourage everyone to move forward and research it a little bit deeper. One thing before I jump into here, the current consumer, the research was not originally geared at specifically the home improvement industry. We did ask several questions about how the movements are affecting the home improvement industry, but that's really an important kind of concept to really grasp. And we'll talk about how consumers really space out their specific home improvement purchasing habits, but across these two movements. But I did want to address that. So what did we find? Let's start out first with the shop local movement. And the way we phrased these kinds of questions were as simple as what kind of things motivate you to shop at a local, independently owned retailer. So this is where those consumers are choosing to patronize, not necessarily where they're made or sourced, which we'll get into later. But what we found was that much like our anecdotal evidence from earlier, 61%, so a large majority of consumers, are saying that they've shopped at a locally owned business within the last month. So that's not even the last year. That's the last month. This is now. This is happening. So that's currently what consumers are doing. Moreover, a third of those respondents say that they're most likely to shop at a local retailer for home improvement products. So again, we're zoning in on that home improvement product and how this trend is specifically influencing the home improvement sector. What we did was we asked a series of questions. Are you more likely to shop at a local independent retailer for clothing, food, home improvement products, etc.? And I think home improvement products was second only to clothing. So that's huge. That's something that you just have to take note of and start acting on, or at least start analyzing in your own market to see if it fits in with your consumers in your areas. And then here at the bottom we have 26%, so over a quarter of respondents said that they feel that it is somewhat or highly important to them to patronize locally owned businesses. So what does that mean to us? Well, as researchers who do this regularly, that stood out very importantly to us, this finding. Not only are consumers shopping for these products locally, they are connecting an emotion to it. So this is emotional connection here that really can drive some sales. So what we have here is that currently consumers are shopping locally, as we saw right now, and they, according to them, see an importance in doing so. Okay, so how about what is the staying factor, or what is the ability for this trend to continue, and should you start focusing in on some of these trends? We actually did have a quarter of the respondents say that they have made a concerted effort to shop local retailers more in the past 12 months. So not only are they shopping, or did they happen to shop at a local independent retailer, they're making a concerted effort to shop at these retailers. So they find and they identify a value with placing their money with a local independent retailer versus maybe a corporately ran or a big box. What we also have is that, and this is one of the coolest statistics, I think, and forgive me for geeking out here, but I just find all this so interesting. But 35% of respondents say that they shop locally because they feel it's important to support the local economy. So what we have here is a trend that's really sparked and really grown out of an economic standard, but I think if you talk to anyone who's been involved in the Shop Local movement or the Made in America trend, it's not something new. In fact, I was just visiting a retailer out in Seattle, and who's been obviously, as someone on the coast, has been involved in the movement for years now, but he said that there's some just astounding percent of his end profits go back to the community. And while he said that this has been something recently that's kind of gotten a lot of fuel and gotten a lot of movement, it's always been the case, but people are finally connecting that. They're connecting that if I give you, Greenwood True Value Hardware retailer my money, I'm in some way driving my future. I'm in some way giving back to my community. So that's just a really cool identification. Again, going back to that emotional connection that we talked about. And then here at the bottom, it's interesting, and we often find this across the retail trends movement, but 16% of respondents say that they shop locally because these merchants offer convenience and a unique product or service selection. So what they're saying is the basic retail principles or pillars apply. You still have to offer a good product. Well, it's great to tote that you shop locally. It's great to advertise that you are made in America. You still, bottom line, have to be convenient, offer a unique product, and have that service and selection, which fits perfectly and is a natural fit for the home improvement industry, the independent home improvement industry. Just another thing to state about the economic connection. Why is this movement starting to take movement right now? This was a question that our editors really threw around. Why right now? And the obvious answer would be because of the economic state of things. But with that connection of shopping local and patronizing the local and the Made in America products, they feel that they're doing their part. They're taking the driver's wheel of that future, and maybe they've seen that business close in their community, or maybe they know someone that lost their job. Maybe they lost their job, and they feel that this is their way of taking part and making a difference, kind of shifting their economic well-being. So moving on, we did want to kind of touch on, when we were asking these questions, what would inhibit someone from shopping locally? What would be something that really would put a halt in that trend? And we weren't surprised. The overwhelming response was that consumers feel that the local retailers they shop might have prices that are too high if they shop local, if they choose to shop local. So that price conception or that price perception is still a big influencer on whether or not this trend will work in your store. Well, I say that, the next statistic might have you saying, Jamie, but you're saying that these consumers are more willing to spend, or still willing to spend more. And that's true. A fourth of the respondents did say that they were willing to spend more. So while they recognize that they might, or I should say perceive that they may be spending more money in a local independent retailer, they're willing to. But as with anything, and we also notice this in a lot of trends, there is kind of a benchmark of where, how far they're willing to spend, how far that value will take them. And the respondents in this survey, with 81% saying that they were willing to spend up to 10% more to support that local business. Anything over that is starting to get a little fuzzy with our consumers in this research. So as one of our respondents said, they're willing to put their money where their mouths are when it comes to this trend. Before I move on, I do want to kind of give you a caveat on some of this research. With surveys like this consumer research, where we talk about, attitudinal behaviors, when people respond to these surveys, typically you're going to see them respond in a more positive light than maybe the reality might be. Typically, it's enough to move some movement or make some actions off of it, but we do want you to keep in mind. So when I say that the consumers in this survey are willing to spend up to 10% more, I'm not necessarily saying that your local, you can jack up your prices 10%, or if you are 10% over, every consumer will invest in that. But what I am saying, and how I would suggest using this research, is to use it as more of an indicator of what's important to your consumers today, how you can cater to this emotional concept, and then instead of using the actual 10% data, understanding that there is that emotional connection and there is something behind supporting this trend, and in theory, consumers are willing to spend more. So that's just something that I wanted to address. If you were to ask a survey about how do you treat your spouse, of course you're going to respond in a more positive light, or how good of a parent are you? You're not going to get someone that says something awful about themselves. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. So I kind of wanted to leave you with the shopping locally. I wanted to leave you with some actionable things, especially our retailers and our manufacturers. What can you do to tap into this trend? Well, first, we always suggest that you do analyze your own market. You do talk to your own consumers. You see what's going on with some of your other local retailers and open that line of conversation. But as far as the research indicated, 39% of the respondents said that they were more likely to shop at a store that advertises that they're locally owned. So I would bet money, and not a lot because I'm saving up for a vacation, but I would bet money to say that many of your products in your store are already made in America, or already locally sourced, or you are a locally owned store, obviously. So tote that, get that out there, get the word out there, and make sure that your customers are recognizing that. According to the research, they'll respond to that. And how about the future of the trend? Does it have some staying power, or is this going to be something that shifts the paradigm? 35% of respondents say that they are definitely more likely to seek out local retailers in the future. So whether they're currently shopping or not, the local independent stores, 35% of these respondents said it's something that they do plan to do or hope to do in the future. So basically what that's telling us is that this is a key opportunity for local retailers to play to those consumers, to listen to them and to respond, and to kind of put your best feet forward and really advertise and really promote the fact that you are a local independent retailer. So at this point, before we kind of shift over to the Made in America product, I will address, we do have, my production team over here did pass me over a question. We had a question on the research. Someone asked, what type of stores were in this shopper survey when I discussed customers are willing to spend more, etc. And this is actually a survey on consumers. So we're asking consumers, not the retail stores, which surveys they shopped. And like I said before, when we addressed the question, we addressed them generically or generally, as in what local independent retailers do you shop? And then we kind of narrowed them down into, would you be more willing to shop at a clothing store? Would you be more willing to shop at a food store? And then on into the home improvement sector. So those are the type of, we didn't specifically ask or limit it to a specific segment or a specific store. And again, we didn't research or we didn't get the data or comb the data from stores. We got it directly from the consumers. And then we're also putting in some of the interviews that we've gotten from the retailers that we speak with. So I hope that kind of addresses that issue or that question. So now let's make a shift over to this Made in America concept. The Made in America concept is more about where the products are sourced, or where are they coming from. So not necessarily where they're being sold. It's where are they made, where are they manufactured, who had their hands on this product before I got it. And what was really interesting about this trend, before we go into it, were two really outstanding responses. One, there seemed to be a more intensive or a stronger connection with the Made in America trend than the shop local. People seem to think that there is a bigger impact made by buying the Made in America products versus just shopping locally. So that kind of stood out as interesting to me. And then the other trend that we saw in this research was that this trend is really split by demographics. So we'll show you, we broke it out by female and male to show you the differences, but the Made in America trend is surprisingly to me, and maybe not surprising to you, but driven by the female sector. And as we've talked about in many articles in the past, many webinars in the past, this growing need to cater to the female consumer because they're starting to make more of the home improvement purchasing decisions. But this just kind of goes along that track even further. What is surprising about this from my perspective, and as we were discussing this research, was a lot of the advertising for the Made in America sector or the Made in America trend is geared. It has this masculine feel, this very male-dominated kind of feel to it. And so that was kind of interesting for us to get back that females actually felt stronger, according to these respondents, about this trend. Not surprisingly, though, and I've been fortunate enough to work on several research projects, this is definitely a trend driven by emotion, and what we see in the past, and I think what we've learned is that women typically and in the past historically have been more driven by more emotional topics, and they cater their purchasing habits, or they inflect their purchasing habits by what they believe, or what societal influences, etc. One question that I kind of had as we were kind of talking about the Made in America trend was I was interested, why is the Made in America stronger than the shop local? Because, in fact, to me, I thought they were very similar. And what we believed as we talked to consumers, our friends, our family, store visits, as well as retailers, manufacturers, and distributors, was that we do think right now, especially with the economic times, this trend's particularly getting a lot of press, and so it's kind of forefront in the consumer's mind. And we know that in the consumer mind, as apparent by this data, consumers are able to more easily connect a psychological connection between, if I buy a Made in America product, I am directly influencing my community. I am directly influencing my neighbor down the street who works in the factory, and so they're really they're driven by this more so. So now for the data. We had 77% of respondents say that it was either somewhat or highly important to them to buy products that were made in America. And what I really wanted to emphasize by this was just this percentage right here, 82% of women versus 73% of men saying, either way, that's huge. Those numbers are huge. So this is obviously something that's happening right now. But it's over 10 percentage points stronger on the female sector. But it's definitely something that's influencing everyone. The next kind of issue that we wanted to take up was, okay, while more people are purchasing the Made in America product, are they finding a direct value in that? And we had about 1 in 4 of the respondents said that they not only bought the product, but they sought out to buy these products. And again, that's going to reflect back on where they shop. If their store down the street sources a lot of Made in America products, they're more likely to shop at that store and get these products right now, according to this data. So just kind of a little sidebar here. What am I trying to say by all this? I am not by any means saying that there's any hard evidence to suggest that women are more patriotic than men, or research, is suggesting anything of that means. What I'm saying is that women are really using this trend right now as a factor in making their purchasing decisions that we've talked about. They're also more likely to be influenced by ads. So again, kind of what we talked about in that shop local movement, 56% of women say that they would be more willing to shop at a store if they advertised that they had Made in America products. Again, it all ties into with the consumers seeking out these products, with 51% of men indicating that they ads specifically geared towards them would influence a change in their shopping behavior. What is interesting, again, the halting factor, or what would stop a consumer from participating in this trend, was price, again, that price perception. And what kind of shifts the table here, and I just find this just blows me away. 40% of men said that they would pay more for a product, but only 32% of women said it. So the whole time I'm telling you that women are, driving this trend. Women are the ones, that we should be advertising to. And while that's true, this statistic totally shifts the tables. 40% of men are saying they paid more, and that's more than women. So women tend to be a little bit harder on, or have a harder time connecting the price value to this particular trend. So keep that in mind as you start investigating what products in your store are Made in America. So that kind of brings up the next topic. One issue that a lot of our editors were having was, well, okay, that's all great and well that more and more consumers are looking for the Made in America products, but how exactly do they define what Made in America is? And so what we did was we asked our friends and family again. We went out to stores. We asked retailers. We did customer interviews. We asked people in our staff, and there was a difference in how somebody would classify what is Made in America, but overwhelmingly, with 50% of our respondents, they kind of laid in line with what we were hearing, that 50% of respondents said that when a product carries the Made in America label, they expect it to be made, assembled, and based in the U.S. So everything. They want everything. From soup to nuts, it's got to be sourced there in America. Now, one thing that I want to address right here, just briefly, is the idea of if you're we're telling you to advertise, we're telling you to promote this trend, we're telling you to go through your stores, go through your products, and find out which ones are made in America. But you've also got to balance that with a kind of a concept that we saw a lot in the green movement here about 2 years ago, this idea of greenwashing, where as this trend becomes more mainstream and more consumers are demanding it and more retailers are taking advantage of it, consumers will start to get wary about what the product is, and what part of it is made in America, and how do you define what that product is when you put a Made in America sticker on it. And so what we suggest is that you not only define, well, we know not everyone's going to have the same definition of what is considered or should be considered Made in America. Make sure that you have a definite store or company definition of Made in America. Make sure that you educate your staff on that. Make sure everybody's on the same page so that when somebody comes in and they pick up a product that has a Made in America sticker on it, you can say, this is exactly what we mean by that. And what you really want to avoid with an emotionally driven trend like this is, as they call it in greenwashing. I don't think they've coined an actual marketing term for it, but you don't want to give them a false impression or give them any possibility of losing loyalty in you with an emotionally driven trend like this. So moving on, 60% of respondents said that the primary reason that they buy a Made in America product is because they feel it's important to support the nation's economy. And what we found is, much like the shop local, with all things the same, people are really making a connection between that nation and supporting, again, taking the driver's wheel, helping support that neighbor down the street that just lost his job. They feel that there's a stronger connection here, and 60% of the respondents said that. And finally, and this was pretty interesting to me, not totally surprising after talking with customers and consumers and retailers, but 19% of the respondents said that the primary reason that they believe in this made in U.S. trend and these products are because they're of better quality. So definitely keep that in mind as you move forward and start advertising or promoting your products. Independents are known for their quality, they're known for their service, and this is just another vehicle to get that point across. Again, we thought it would be very appropriate to ask, okay, well, we understand this is important to you and you're telling us this is important. What would stop you from buying Made in America products? What would be that inhibitor? And what we found was, again, that price perception. Consumers think that higher price tags or higher premiums come with the Made in America product. And we had 78% did say, again, and this just blows my mind, that over 3/4 of the consumers said, well, we know that there may be a higher price tag, we're willing to pay more, at a bench price, again, at about 10%. And then finally, 35% of respondents said that they would be willing to pay more for a product made in the U.S., and that kind of just goes back up to that 78%, though will tap out at about 10%, keeping in mind we're not telling you to increase it to 10%, but know that consumers are saying they do place a value in this, and they are willing to go the extra mile and put their money where their mouth is. Now, I kind of have an interesting stat here at the bottom, and I kind of had to squeeze it in, but I'm trying to get to as much information as possible here. And this is interesting. Again, the willingness to spend was weaker among women, which we found again in the shop local, 32% women versus 39% men. But it was higher among lower income consumers and rural consumers. And that caught me off guard, because I'm thinking, well, if I make less, I'm more willing to pay for a product that is made in the U.S. or really any trend. And the more I thought about it, it really made sense, because people in those brackets, the lower income and the rural consumers, are just one step closer to that manufacturing process. They literally may have been affected by the economy. They are a direct witness to what's happening, or they are directly impacted by that. And so that emotional that emotional perception really takes hold in those specific consumer categories, and it falls, if you think about it that way, it falls right in line with the research that we found, with 39% of the lower income saying they'd paid more, and 42% of the rural customers saying they paid more for the Made in America. Okay, so moving on, we wanted to talk about, again, some actionable points. Again, advertising is key with getting this trend out and getting consumers to equate you to the Made in America products. We had 53% of respondents say that they were more apt to buy a product if it advertises that it is made in America or made in the USA. Well, this is already a pretty large statistic of over half. 36% on top of that said they might be. So, you know, you're right there at a majority of the people saying they may or they definitely are influenced by advertising. So what we're seeing is a lot of manufacturers who are made in America are really starting to rein that in and use that. More and more distributors are actually starting to create signage packaging to help support their customers to get the word out. And then right below that, we have 48% of respondents said that when a product carries the Made in the USA designation, they believe it. This kind of put my concerns about what was happening with the green movement, with the greenwashing, to kind of put that to rest a little bit, because we have 48% that they definitely believe when a product says it's made in the U.S., it is in fact made in the U.S. And then 44% on top of that say that sometimes they believe that. And what kind of was interesting, we visited a store, and it's called the All American Store here in the Midwest, and they spend concerted effort researching the products that they sell, and they will only sell products that are sourced, made, you name it, in their store. And so, you know, as much as I was a little you know, I had some doubts about whether people believed this. It seems to be that retailers are very find this a very, very important topic and are really doing their research, and that consumers are noting that, and that they are in fact believing those designations. Okay, so well, this is great, and this is what's happening now. What about the future? Is this a trend that's going to continue? You know, we're starting to see a little uptick in the economy. Is that going to mean the vanishing of this trend? Well, 51% of respondents, whether they did or didn't purchase made in the U.S. or products in the past few months, said that they plan to seek those out in the future. So again, they're finding a value, they're connecting an emotion to this, and 36% of that on top of that say that they might. So it's really something that we believe has some staying power and has a real advantage for the independent sector. So what are some things to take away from the research that we provided here today? Basically, overwhelmingly, consumers are more receptive to that Made in America, shop local message than maybe we ever thought before. Anecdotally, we saw it. You know, I choose to shop the local restaurant instead of the chain store or what have you. But now we have some quantifiable data. Consumers also are seeing a parallel between this insular purchasing, so they're purchasing a little bit closer to home. They're connecting that with, I'm making a difference in my economy, I'm making a difference in my community. When I give my independent retailer money, I know I'm getting it back, or my neighbor's getting it back. What we did and did want to draw some attention to is that there tends to be a stronger correlation between those two things, between the Made in the U.S. products over the shop local, but again, both we see as driving factors for the independent sector. Women tend to be more influenced by these localized efforts, so make sure you don't discount that in your promotions and your advertising, etc. And then, will shoppers follow through with their ideals? I left this as a question because I don't think we ever know. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You never know with consumers, but it's definitely something that our research indicates is something that's going on right now for sure, and has the potential to continue to be a main important factor for consumers. So with that kind of sums up our data. I'd love to kind of address some of the questions, and we're going to unmute Mark right now. And if you have any questions about Channel Lock, its Made in America movement, what they've done to be known as a Made in America product and have that recognition, maybe you can ask him for some suggestions. But let's go into some of these questions. And again, if you have any later or you want this webinar, you can always contact me there at the email provided. So the first question we have is, did you see Shop Local as a stronger theme in any certain regions of the country or among any certain income levels? So first we'll start out with the regions. And we always find it very important to separate our research across the regions for this very reason. And we found that, well, cumulatively we were able to give you this data. Typically, as we find in a lot of trends, it starts stronger on the coast. The two coasts. So you got your West Coast and your East Coast, and then it starts to move inward. Having just gone out to Seattle just last week, this is nothing new. I was so excited about all this research, and I was sharing it with a retailer, and he's told me, yeah, this is nothing new for us. But for here in Indiana, it's really, that Midwest, it's really starting to infiltrate inward, and it's really starting to increase here in the country, in the inner part of the country. So it's definitely always a little bit stronger on the coast, I think you'll find, with some of these emotional, attitudinal trends, but we're seeing a move in. And then as far as the income levels, we discussed a little bit that, and I find this surprising. In fact, it's I think one of the strongest things that came out of the research was that the lower income bracket and the rural customers who maybe have a closer tie or a closer emotional societal reaction to this trend typically are willing to spend more. As far as brackets who actually interact with the trend and who are taking part in it, it tends to be pretty even across the way. Again, we did see a little bit stronger in the lower income bracket and the rural bracket, and of course the female bracket, but it's definitely something that did cross over borders. So we have this question that says, have you looked at Google Local at all? Do you think that the local retailers have anything to gain from becoming Google plus Bing merchants? Well, so Google Local is, and I'm just starting to do some research on this, but as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this really puts independents kind of at the forefront of their consumers and Google helps connect the consumer with their local merchants. We did not send out surveys specifically about Google, Bing, anything like that. In fact, Planet DIY, our newest initiative, connects the independent with their consumer. We did not ask specific questions on that, but anecdotally what we found is that these efforts have not necessarily encouraged, but have become an increase in usage. People are using them more to act on the trend. So I don't know if I feel comfortable saying that Google or Bing or Google Local influenced it or caused the trend to really take off, but I think that just like the internet, it's become a vehicle to help these products or help this trend really take off. Okay, actually, Mark, I think they're probably so sick of hearing my voice, so I'm going to toss to you a couple, but we have one question. One customer asked us, does Channel Lock have a co-op ad program for Made in the U.S.? Can you tell us a little bit about your advertising and your programs for your Made in the U.S.?
Sure, Jamie. Actually, at this point in time, we do not have a retail co-op ad program strictly for Made in USA. We do have a cooperative advertising program through all of our distributor partners. That's certainly something to consider. I'm sitting here with our director of marketing and listening in, and we're tossing ideas around about some things that we could do to help independent retailers from a merchandising standpoint to draw attention to some of our products at the store shelf. Some of the best things that we've done from a marketing perspective, and maybe could be translated over to the independent retailer from a very low cost perspective, is engaging the end user in social media efforts and drawing them in through some additional tie-ins to your promotional flyer efforts for having a Made in America section and tying that emotional tie as you do locally into a Made in USA, whether it's through contests or some sort of giveaways to draw people in to your location. So I think it's a good point. We don't have a co-op ad program for that specifically, but we're kicking a lot of ideas around and growing with this movement. We'll think about it.
Great. Well, this obviously is definitely a hot button topic. We've got a lot of questions here coming in, so I'll answer a couple more here until the end of this webinar. And again, you can always contact me directly. We could talk about this. I can share the data with you. I can share. We're actually going to have a white paper, so we have a lot of people asking us whether we're going to have the questions available. Absolutely. NRHA is here to support you. Anything we create or produce is here to help you. So go ahead and contact me or stay up to date with NRHA.org, and you can get that white paper and have all this data for yourself. We did have a question. Did you do any research on how and where consumers are doing their research on what products are made in America? And we did not do any actual data questioning. Typically, we try to narrow the scope down in a question like this to see simply what's driving the trend. And so if we start going into different topics like this, sometimes we lose the efficiency of the data. But what I can tell you from consumers that I've talked to, some retailers that talk with customers day in and day out, is the internet, for good or bad, is becoming more of a resource on where consumers are doing their research. So they're coming in knowing, or what they think they know, what they hear on the internet of whether a product is made in America. So what I would suggest, with that being said, is making sure that you invite vendors like Channel Lock in to help you understand what products are made in America, and then take that education and get that out to your staff. So when somebody does come in, the implications with this question is, they might be getting some varying questions or varying degrees of research on what products are made in America. You'll be able, at a comfortable level, to answer those questions as far as the products you source.
Jamie,
yes?
If I may, this is Mark again at Channel Lock. One easy way maybe to help too is your distributor or co-op should have that listing in their database of country of origin, and they be able to provide a listing for you of all of those products made in USA. Made in USA is an absolute standard which requires FTC regulation and substantial transformation and a significant portion of the product goods manufactured or raw materials manufactured here. So it is a standard. You can't just put that label on unless it's legitimate. So starting with your distributor might be a good place.
Well, I think that's a great point. And we actually had a question here that said, do you have a list of vendors that would be good, Made in America promotions? And again, I would just echo what Mark said. Turn to your wholesalers, turn to your distributors, turn to your vendors, and ask them questions like that. Also, it sounds as though many of the federal sites might have some baselines or some benchmarks of whether a product is made in America, and they might be able to connect you with those vendors. Mark, I have a question, and I'm wondering if maybe you'd be better to answer this. I can tell you what I've seen, but I know that you guys are huge supporters of in-store merchandising. But this question is, how does a retailer implement the Made in America products inside their store? How do they promote them once they're in the store, and what can they do to get that message across?
Well, obviously, any type of point of purchase is a good way to start, and detailing those things out with shelf talkers or wobbles. But a lot of people, as I've traveled around the country, have actually taken segments of those products once they've identified them, and using both the American flag as a background or as a draw, is create sections within their store specifically for those goods. And then again, they match that with their promotional or advertising efforts with their flyers and their efforts with their social media and other outreach programs.
Okay, great. Those are great tips, and that's kind of what we've seen. You know, a lot of our distributors are putting together signage, packaging to help, as well as some of the retailers we spoke with are having special events. You know, especially centered around particularly notable holidays like the 4th of July and things like that, to really get those messages out that they're the destination. Finally, the last question we have, there's actually three, and a lot of them are on some of the data. So there's some questions on, you know, how much more was a customer willing to spend? And I think some of these questions could be answered just simply by going back through the webinar. I think we try to break it out in the Shop Local and the Made in America. We have one person that said that the earlier slide said that only 25% of consumers are willing to spend more for Made in America, and actually I believe that might have been in the Shop Local section. So I would just suggest going back through that. And then you have a really good point about the pricing perception and concern about whether you source these products. Can you afford, you know, the people that aren't willing to spend more? And you know, you need we're not here, this data isn't here to give you a guideline or to say only source certain products, only don't source. It's simply to show you that this is what consumers are saying. There is this trend going on in the movement. It would be like saying, should you only source green products? Well, I don't, depending on your region, I don't know. I probably would never tell you to source all of any kind of product. I wouldn't tell you to source all of hand tools. I think you've got to have that balance. You've really got to take into account your specific market and see what that staying power is, see what that penetration value is of the trend in your market, and then balance it out. I don't think this data should by any means be a finalizing factor for any of your purchasing decisions. And as we said again, typically with this attitudinal behavior research, you're going to see a lot of people commenting better than or what they believe is a better light than maybe realistically what they are willing to spend or where they're willing to spend. So I think you have to be realistic and use the data just as any data in a very careful manner, but it's definitely giving you some huge feedback on who's shopping this, and that it is a trend that's happening, and there is some potential for the independent sector to really get involved and potentially benefit from it. So I think that is really all the questions that we have. Again, I'd really just encourage everyone to head to nrha.org in a couple of days and go back through the recording and the presentation. The white paper will be available, I believe, by the end of August. You can always contact me. We can talk about it. But go back through, and if you have any questions later at any point, feel free to contact me. Mark, I'm sure, would be graciously willing to answer any questions about Channel Lock's experience, and we just really appreciate their support, Channel Lock's support in fielding this research. We think it's a really important topic, and we hope that everybody's gained something from it. Mark, are there any concluding statements you want to share?
No, this has been a very interesting program for us to be involved in, and we've been living this for 125 years. Been making pliers here for that long and continue to do so. And we are certainly seeing a trend. This is not hocus pocus. And we're taking full advantage of it because it's important also for our company, but also, I think, for the country. So people are making a success out of it. And if we could ever do anything to assist you, you can look at us up at channellock.com. I'm always willing to answer any questions, anything we can do. And your questions have given us some additional thoughts of how we can help the independent channel. So thanks for your time today.
Great. Thank you all so much, and we hope you join us for future installments of the NRHA webinar series. Thanks.